Democrat to minimize their votes. Stealing our democracy, we should be at their throats. They'd rather gerrymander so they don't have to answer, raising nobles from the grave like an elected necromancer.
When we talk about a political primary, what it means is you have candidates in the Democratic Party, candidates in the Republican Party, competing against each other to get the support of the people in their respective parties. Well, forget about that. That's old news. Now the goal is to appeal to one multi-billionaire so that individual can contribute hundreds of millions of dollars into your campaign.
Citizens united, more like citizens divided. Namesake meant to fool you is intentionally misguided. To call this freedom of speech is exceptionally nearsighted. SCOTUS back the 1%, all of whom we're delighted. We get freedom of speech, but in proportion to our dollar. Voice trained out by the elite as our own voice gets smaller. Their dogma broadcast complete, all you can do is holler. Threatens our democracy as our freedom gets squandered. Speech by politicians and fabricate suspicions. Disguises toxic visions used to block more court decisions. Oversimplifies the complex and preys on our emotions. Skips balances and checks to enforce preconceived notions. It's just how they do business, and we all watch them do it. They tell us that it's legal and there is nothing more to it. Half the voting population have all just said, well, screw it. The other half would overthrow if they only knew it.
One person, one vote, that we're all equal, that you have as much say about what happens in government as anybody else? Or do we want to have a political system where a handful of billionaires will determine who gets elected president, who gets elected senator, who gets elected governor, and have members of Congress go crawling up to these billionaires? What do you need, Mr. Billionaire? How do I get the hundreds of millions of dollars you can give me? Is that really what American democracy is supposed to be about?
It's a campaign contribution, it's not freedom of speech. Like in the Constitution, but puts bribery in their reach. We need more prosecution to end this overreach. They're buying politicians to keep them on a leash. It's what's lining their pockets, why would they reform? Dirty campaign finance makes these puppets reform. If money changes hands and services are rendered, they owned you from the moment dirty cash money was tendered. Loyalty to your own team is showing your consent. What will be left of this scheme when our trust has all been spent? Billions to buy laws, despite public discontent, to eliminate your vote or make it irrelevant. This is not a donation, they are buying a product. Bribery skirts the laws and masquerades as good conduct. Corruption so ingrained that it's baked into the construct. It's time we show our leaders that they can't all go and get one.
When you talk about an inalienable right that restricted voting.
Hey guys, Guy Level here, and today
5 different ways, all of which disproportionately affected African Americans. They went on to say, this is the Fourth Circuit. I didn't say this. The federal court said it with almost surgical precision. We are better than that.
The 3 wealthiest people in this country own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 160 million people. The top 1/10 of 1% own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%.
In the United States of the rich, where you can pay for most any wish. If you were born with the cash, you don't even ask. In the United States of the rich, or picking teams in a game where both sides lose and billionaires get to choose what you see in the news. If you control information, you control people's views. If you can hide all the clues, then you can spin all the issues. When freedom of speech means freedom of dollars, means freedom for rich, not for our sons and daughters. They ignore all the work of our science and scholars. They represent the rich donors, not the average and smaller. Massive cuts to the top, they promise will trickle down, which go to shareholders as the rich people drown. And all their new money while we bow to the crown. The 99 at our dreams, we get nothing but let down. Let them keep you distracted, filled up with hate and fear, while the game that they're playing becomes painfully clear. Collect all of the money and put it all at the top. Call you unpatriotic when you ask them to stop.
Today, corporate profits are at an all-time high, while wages are near an all-time low.
What we're talking about is the ability of wealthy interest to speak louder than...
Oops, wrong screen. Oops. Give me 1 second to fix this. I forgot to change the setting here. There we go. There we go. Okay, welcome everybody. Took me a second there because I got my window set up incorrectly, but welcome. It's good to be back here Saturday night. Got a couple people in here. Glad to have you back. Glad to have you watching things. We're going to dive into some news here. This week, it was a little bit harder to find the fun stories. So the fun stories are more like, woo, we dodged a bullet on that one. Not super exciting, but we got a few mixed in there. This week was a bit of a dumpster fire as far as news goes, up to and including what just happened in the last couple of hours. So let's take a look at things. So we've got, oops, let me move this over here. Let me fix. All right, so Trump just admitted on live television he will terminate Social Security and Medicare if reelected in November. So we'll look, he didn't exactly say those words, right? They've got it in quotes there in the headline, but that's not exactly how he said it. But that's essentially, that's the effects of what he said is going to happen. So this just came out like 1 or 2 hours ago. It's just sort of coming out right now. So people are still going through and figuring out exactly what all of this means. But the president just signed some executive orders because Congress can't get it together and put together the next bill that's going to go through and help people in this really bad time economically and coronavirus and all that kind of stuff. Congress can't get it together. So Trump came out, signed some executive orders, which kind of sound good at first, but there's some issues. So let's dive into these a little bit. We've got, let's see, where's the, there was 3 things he passed. So he did pass a moratorium on mortgages. Now that's just going to be federally backed mortgages because that's basically what Trump could do with executive orders. So these executive orders are extremely limited in scope. So that's why he wasn't able to do another round of checks, right? Like people got the $1,200 checks before. Can't do that in the same way because basically Congress has to work through budgets, right? So the only money that he really had to deal with was the money that was approved in the last bailouts that hasn't been spent yet, right? Which isn't very much money. So he really couldn't have done anything meaningful as far as giving money back to people. Excuse me. As far as giving money back to people. So that's why there's no straight up checks being given in this situation. And then let's see, there's the big one that people are sort of very concerned about is the payroll tax deduction. So he signed a payroll tax deduction into place. And let's take a look at him talking about it right here.
If I'm victorious on November 3rd, I plan to forgive these taxes and make permanent cuts.
Oops, let's go back.
If I'm victorious on November 3rd, I plan to forgive these taxes and make permanent cuts to the payroll tax. I'm going to make them all permanent.
So here's the issue. He's issued a payroll tax, and this is the sort of the good and bad of it. So some people then will see about a 7% increase in your paycheck coming up because the payroll tax is being cut for the remainder of the year. Now, here's a problem. One is that it's just being cut like temporarily. In other words, you'd still have to pay it when you do your taxes next year. So it's kind of problematic. It's not like we're being given extra money. It's like we're being given extra money that we're going to have to give back later, unless Trump is elected. So if he's elected, he'll make that payroll tax permanent, which is problematic in a few ways. One, you're essentially, it's a little bit of an extortion, right? We're going to keep this money. I'll make it permanent if you elect me. So it's clearly kind of a ploy to get reelected. Here's the problem. Payroll tax funds Social Security and Medicare. So Social Security and Medicare are already having issues as far as being funded. Well, if we cut those back even more, like these are significant cuts to that payroll tax, then we're going to see Social Security and Medicare even more underfunded, which essentially is going to get us to this point, which is kind of Trump and in large part the Republican playbook, which is we're seeing him do it with the post office. You sabotage something till it doesn't work, and then you say, okay, we got to step in and take over because this thing is such a mess. which is kind of appears to be the long-term plan, which is you got Social Security and Medicare, and then later they're going to have to step in and go, sorry, everybody, we're cutting your benefits significantly because we just don't have the money. So this, for many people, this is not exactly a good thing. Well, of course, he didn't explain that. He just said, hey, tax cuts, and we'll make them permanent if you vote for me. I hope people, when they go to vote, realize you're also voting to really endanger Social Security and Medicare. And considering that the better of the two choices we have right now in Biden has in the past also signaled in his history that he would get rid of, he would commit to, or he would be involved in Social Security cuts. It's not good. It's not looking good for people who are counting on Social Security and Medicare in their later years. This is effectively an attack on that. So that's kind of what we understand at the moment. Like I say, this literally just happened hours ago. So we will see as the lawyers and the legal experts dive into this and figure out exactly what's going on underneath the hood here. We'll know more later, right? We'll learn more about this as things go on. Okay, here's one that's not, is interesting news. Interesting news. We got Kanye West booted off Illinois ballot amid thousands of invalid signatures. So the reason this is interesting, the Kanye West situation, is no one's really sure exactly what this is going to do to voting, right? So some people think that Kanye would essentially suck up votes from the Democrat side because of identity politics. I'm a little doubtful of that. It seems to me like voters this cycle are a little bit I think we're seeing people with a level of understanding of the government that maybe we haven't in the past. So I tend to think that people are going to be thinking a little bit deeper than that. So I don't know that he would necessarily suck up votes from Biden, but that's what some people think. Although Kanye West is he's wearing the red hat. He's visiting Trump in the office. So it's also possible that he would suck up votes from Trump. This isn't really understood. Hopefully he'd suck up votes really from no one. He shouldn't even really be in there. He's not a serious candidate. And that's kind of what we're looking at. Now, he's having trouble getting on ballots. I think he's on one or two ballots at this point, but states are starting to step in and look at this because apparently a lot of the signatures that are being turned in are not valid, right? People are like, there was who was it? People are signing Bernie Sanders' name when they signed their signature to get Kanye on the ballot. People were putting Mickey Mouse, all sorts of stuff. So I think it was he only needed about 2,500 votes. And of the 3,100 that he got, about 1,900 appear to be invalid. So that's like almost all of them, right? That's like the vast majority of his signatures aren't even valid. So it looks like he won't be on there in Illinois. Since this came to light, now Wisconsin is starting to look at their signatures. They're probably going to find that a lot of those signatures are not valid. And this could actually get Kanye into legal trouble because he's being accused essentially of fraud. Now, I doubt that like Kanye was sitting there writing Mickey Mouse on these, but somewhere along the way, it appears that people were either just vastly incompetent about what they were trying to do, or there was actually an intention to defraud the government with fake signatures. We don't really know. And again, the disclaimer you kind of always got to throw out there when Kanye's on there. I kind of feel a little bit for Kanye because, as we know, he's has bipolar issues, and believe me, I've known people who have bipolar issues in my lifetime, and it's a sad thing. It's terrible when people are sort of struggling and losing control of things. But he's putting himself on the world stage, and we kind of have to be able to call that out and say, look, I'm sorry you're having a hard time. I'm sorry if the mental illness is sort of getting the best of you right now, but you're doing things that affect this entire country. So you're putting yourself in the spotlight in that situation there. So that isn't good. So we'll see what happens. It's really up in the air with Kanye West as far as what this is, what he's going to do as far as stealing votes from which side of the aisle he'll be getting these votes from. So this is something that has occurred. So, state won't collect or release data on coronavirus cases in Tennessee schools. So, as we've seen since the Trump administration came over, a lot of information is essentially being hidden or destroyed and then moved to being not collected in the first place. We saw this when many of the departments of our government were not supposed to do science on climate change, right? They weren't supposed to be keeping track of climate change, all that kind of stuff, right? Just don't even have it. This is another situation. They've learned if we don't collect the data in the first place, then it can't be discovered by other people, right? If your department has information that you've collected, but you don't want to release it, then there can be lawsuits that can get that information. But if you simply don't collect the data in the first place, then people can't sue you to get that data because you never collected it, which is incredibly irresponsible, right? The state of Tennessee isn't even going to collect information about coronavirus cases in the schools. I don't know how that can in any way be argued as being responsible. If you're sending your people into a dangerous situation, don't you want to know if it's dangerous or not? Don't you want to know what's going on there? So this is one of those, it would appear that the goal here is to align yourself with Trump, do what he wants you to do, and not necessarily about keeping people healthy and taken care of. Okay, so then Trump made waves a little bit. Let's see. Legal experts ridicule Trump's suggestion that only Florida should vote by mail. So basically, he came out in a tweet and said, I thought I had the tweet right here. Where did that go? It's in here somewhere. He basically said, if I can get this. Legal experts ridicule Trump's suggestion that only Florida should vote by mail. So he came out and said Florida's totally good to vote by mail, right? So my suspicion is that someone was crunching numbers and figured out, look, Trump, if your people in Florida are not able to vote by mail, you're going to lose Florida. And as we know, a Republican has not won the White House without Florida in, I forget what it is, 70 years or something like that. It's some ridiculously long period of time. Republicans historically need Florida in order to win the election. So it's okay there, but then he turned around at the same time and he's actually filed a lawsuit against Nevada for doing the same exact thing, right? That's the same exact thing, vote by mail. They want everyone in the state to be able to vote by mail. When asked why, well, one argument being given, well, Florida's been run by Republican governors, so they know what they're doing. That's literally one of the answers that he gave at one time about why that would be a situation. So that's obviously not a good answer. I mean, this is very transparent, right? I don't think anyone's being fooled by this. There's really no way you can get around saying voting by mail is fine in Florida, but nobody else better try it or we're going to take you to court. And I can't imagine that it's going to hold up in court when he's literally allowing other states to do it. Why would you be able to justify that it's any differently? And all the legal experts are saying, yeah, it's not any different. There's no difference here, unless it's just for a political advantage. So it's not really going to hold water. All right. Trump and Jared Kushner's personal banker is under review by Deutsche Bank over her purchase of a $1.5 million Manhattan apartment from a Kushner-owned company. So this is a situation where Deutsche Bank's actually in the news for a couple of things this week. I think we've got the other story here on the docket coming up, but the first one is that, so when you're one of these bigwigs, you're one of these billionaires, and you go to deal with the Deutsche Bank, they essentially assign someone to you that you're going to work with. It's your personal banker, right? When people like me go to the bank, it's just whoever's on there will help you out with your stuff, and you have to re-explain everything. Well, when you're super rich, they assign someone to you who knows your case, knows what you want, knows what they need to do for you, knows your history, all this kind of stuff, so they can service you at a high level. Well, the person that was assigned to Trump and Jared Kushner apparently has been caught in a situation that Deutsche Bank's not real happy about. So it makes sense that if you're a banker working for Deutsche Bank, that they would have rules in place that you're not supposed to do business dealings with the people that you're the personal banker for, right? Because this would create a conflict of interest for Deutsche Bank. If you're getting special treatment from Trump from Trump and Jared Kushner, then maybe you're not really protecting the best interests of Deutsche Bank. Maybe you're saying, okay, I'm getting along good with Trump. He did me some favors. I'm going to do him a favor with this loan from the bank. So what happened was this personal banker was able to buy an apartment overlooking drawing a blank on the name, the big park in New York City, Central Park. Is that what it's called? Central Park, where so it's tiny. It's like a 900 square foot apartment. She bought it for $1.5 million. However, that is well below fair market value. So basically, she was able to buy a property from Jared Kushner at well below market value while servicing his stuff at Deutsche Bank. Well, Deutsche Bank's not happy about this, and they're looking into it. And there's, this could get bad for this situation, and it certainly puts light on Trump and Jared Kushner and their dealings with Deutsche Bank. And also the other story that I think we've got in here, Deutsche Bank basically at this point is having to turn over records. So we've been hearing about this for, I don't know how many months it's been, that people were trying to get their hands on Trump's Deutsche Bank records because there's a number, like New York's a big one, but there's other places as well that are looking into fraud involving involving Trump. So you kind of, like, what they're basically thinking is that when Trump does his taxes, this is one of the many things he's possibly in trouble for. When he does his taxes, he really makes it look like he doesn't have much money, he doesn't have much property. They really devalue everything. But then when he goes to get loans from the bank, then he makes everything really high. I'm worth a ton of money. I have lots of assets. They're really valuable. So somebody is getting in trouble here, either or is getting screwed in this situation. It's either the bank is being defrauded, which you're not supposed to do, or it's the United States government, right? So this is one of the reasons people are trying to get their hands on those actual documents from Deutsche Bank. Okay, that looks, yeah. Okay, where are we? Oops. Okay, so here's kind of one of the sillier stories a little bit. Let's see if I can bring this down. So the headline. And this is for real, right? This is not The Onion. You can see this is coming out of Forbes. Definitely not The Onion here, is Forbes website. In a twist on loyalty programs, Emirates is promising travelers a free funeral if infected with COVID. Okay, so you go fly on their plane, and if you die from this, if you get COVID on their flight and you end up dying, then this company is going to spend, I forget what it is, about $3,500 on a funeral for you. So if that totally eases your fears about traveling during the virus, then by all means, go check out, go fly with Emirates. They'll have you all taken care of, right? They definitely have your best interest at heart there. So a Yale study has shown, let's see, how can I move up a little bit? There we go. So yeah, we've heard this, and we even heard it today with these new rollouts that the president signed, these executive orders. People have been saying, mostly the conservative side has been saying, that the $600 unemployment bonuses led to people not wanting to go to work because they're saying, well, I'm getting more on unemployment. Why should I go work? Which I find dubious to begin with. I think the reason people don't want to go back to work is probably because they're scared for their health, would be my guess, right? But what Yale found here is that it isn't even happening, right? Basically, people are getting back to work. You can only count on unemployment for so long. And the truth is, if you're in the situation where you are making more on unemployment than you were at your job, you are kind of not making a lot of money to begin with. Right? So most people would rather get themselves in a stable situation, make some money. And we're talking about the people at the very, very bottom anyways, if that made a difference for you. So it's the people that are the most needy and not a ton of people anyways. But what this Yale work is showing is that it didn't stop anyone from going back to work. And we actually saw that the unemployment numbers just came out and they looked good. We had this little bit of a dip back up as the country was trying to open back up. What we saw was, yes, people were going out and they were getting jobs. So this rhetoric that we hear that no one's going back to work, everyone's trying to hire, but no one wants to take those jobs, and it's because of the $600 unemployment bonuses. It's just propaganda, right? It's not really the situation. So So that's good to know, to be armed with when you're considering the news and the politics. So this does relate one of Trump's executive orders that he signed hours ago was to give $400 unemployment bonuses. So it was kind of in the middle. I think they split the difference. The Democrat bill, I think, wanted $600 again. The Republicans were offering $200. So Trump, it looks like he just split it down the middle and said, we're going to go with $400. Okay, we're going to go with $400 unemployment bonuses. And he was actually asked in the press conference, why did you go with 400? And then he went to this rhetoric too. He said, well, 600 was keeping people from going back to work. We didn't want to give them that much money because we still want people to go back to work when they have the opportunity to do that. Well, Yale is showing us right here that that's not actually the case. Let's see. Yield underpants. No, members of Congress get over $170K per year, and they seem too lazy to go back to work. Yeah, I don't get the thing where they're leaving to. I mean, what bigger crisis could you have, right? We're in a global pandemic, which is being handled terribly by our government, and then trying to keep our country from going off this economic cliff here, and making sure people have roofs over their heads and can eat. And they all go home. So yeah, I get it. Why are they not working? They should be working every single day. They should be working on weekends until the American people are as comfortable as they are, right? Your leaders shouldn't really be that much more comfortable than the majority of your population, right? So yeah, I agree there. All right, then we've got this attack on our postal service, which is just sort of getting worse and worse. Excuse me. And I'm going to go ahead and call this just straight out corruption. I'll show you why in just a minute. So this has been a developing story going on for a little while. The postal union leader warns Trump's assault on USPS and mail-in voting puts nations on dangerous path towards dictatorship. So, yeah, thanks, Underpants Gnome. I'm enjoying the channel growing as well, right? I definitely like that. Thanks for the comment. So what we're seeing here is an attack on the Postal Service. So there's been an attack for a long time, and, you know, the Republicans are in general kind of leading that attack, but the Democrats can share in that too, because there were Democrats who voted for this attack 15 years ago, putting really unnecessary financial restraints on the post office that they had to fund their pensions for the next 75 years, which is crazy. They're funding pensions for people who aren't born yet, which caused a huge, like no other company can do that. Put a huge strain on the post office. And now what we're seeing is Trump put someone in place who has no history with the post office, put him in place to lead the post office. That person is making changes in the name of making the post office financially viable again. But really what we're already seeing massive slowdowns in the post office. Some people are saying it's taking, you know, an extra like 4 to 5 days to get their mail. So big slowdowns. And this is one of the things you're not supposed to do is work any overtime right now. So in other words, once you're done, you just stop. Like if mail's not delivered, boom, you let it wait till the next day. And they're slowly starting to build up day by day. There's a little, if you have a little bit left over each day, then it builds up into a lot of leftovers, which means we're actually expected to see these wait times grow. So that's bad, considering that at minimum, you're going to see about 1 in 4 people vote by mail in November, right? That's what we saw 4 years ago. It was about 1 in 4 people voted by mail. They're saying that in all likelihood, you're going to see at least 40% of the country vote by mail in November. And they're saying potentially, right, if there's a big wave of this kind of stuff, you could see upwards of 70% of people voting by mail. Well, that's a problem if all of a sudden mail is taking an extra 2, 3, 4, 5 days. It means a lot of votes are not going to be counted. We're going to see lots of lawsuits over this, right? We're going to see lawsuits, and that's not what you want when you're trying to count votes, is two sides issuing lawsuits, because lawsuits take a long time. We'd just like the votes to be able to come in, count them, figure out who's a winner, at least within a couple days, figure out who's a winner and move on from there. The longer it takes, the more you're giving people to get, start to wonder if the election was done right and all sorts of stuff, right? We want a nice, clean election. And it looks like the post office is not going to be up to the task because of this attack that's being put on it, essentially. And it turns out, right, they want to look into this postmaster pick, right? I think this is the right one, right? And here is why, right? This is rather upsetting. But we've seen this. We've seen when Trump picks somebody and puts them in charge of a department, it's usually to destroy that department, right? You put someone in charge of the EPA who literally doesn't want the EPA to exist. You put someone in charge of Department of Energy who literally said he wants to get rid of the Department of Energy. Here we have, I think this is actually worse. We have someone put in charge of the post office who has massive investments in post office competitors, right? So we see here, if I can highlight this for everybody. So DeJoy is the name of the individual who's running the post office. I forget his first name at the moment, but his name's DeJoy. Yeah, there we go. So DeJoy and his wife, Aldona Wass, the ambassador nominee to Canada, have between $30.1 million and $75.3 million in assets in postal service competitors or contractors, according to Wass's financial disclosure paperwork filed with the Office of Government Ethics. So this is their own paperwork that they turned in to be transparent about, yeah, here's my financial ties. $30 to $75 million invested in competitors to the post office. This is literally the definition of conflict of interest. You put someone in charge of the post office who has millions invested in the post office competitors. Of course, that person is going to slow things down and try to wreck the post office, because then all their 30 to 75 million is going to go up, right? That's going to become even higher. So I definitely hope that the Congress follows up with this and investigates this, because this is not good for anybody, right? Whatever side of the aisle you're on, you need the post office. Right? If you're in these rural areas, you're on the conservative side of things, you need the post office, right? They need it just as maybe more than anyone else. So that's kind of disgusting to see that that's who manages to get put into place here. Some good news about voting. Oops, if I get this over here. So more than 1 million former felons in Florida regained the right to vote, and this group is trying to register them for the 2020 election. So quick review. Let's remember what happened. So the people of Florida, 2 years ago, 1 or 2 years ago, they voted that felons should be able to regain the right to vote. Now, this isn't all felons, but it's most of them, right? And we'll see that Ohio did the same thing. It was down to just 3 states, not Ohio. It was Iowa, Kentucky, and Florida were the only 3 states where if you were a felon, you were never going to vote again in that state. You just weren't allowed to. Well, Arkansas changed their, or was it Kentucky? Kentucky changed their law. I forget which of those it was. Florida just changed their law. And then just this week, actually, I think we've got it on the docket here, but Ohio changed it too. So I think if you're convicted of murder or sexual assault, I think you still don't get that right back, maybe, but most other people can. However, then what the Florida state legislature did, because the red side didn't like that, so they came out and said, that's fine, you can get your vote back, but you have to pay all your fines back first. Any money owed to the state, you have to pay back. This went through the courts because I honestly don't understand how you could argue that's anything but a poll tax, which we've already decided in this country is not acceptable. You can't put a poll tax on people. People should be able to vote. But it made it through the courts, and they have to pay their fines back before they're allowed to vote. So people are trying to go out. This group here, right? If you're looking for someone to help out, the group, what are they called? The Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, right, is a good group. They're trying to get people that right to vote back. And actually, LeBron James has stepped in, and they're actually donating money to help people pay off those fines so that they can regain their vote, right? So this is a situation where, I just want everybody voting, right? Even if you don't agree with me, we need people voting. People should be casting votes in the election. I go on about this almost every time, but we need to get people their voting rights. That's absolutely crucial as a part of things. So at least there's an effort, right? This is one of those good news things. We're getting people their rights to vote. Hopefully people can help get those fines paid for, get people registered to vote. There's an interesting video if you look it up online. think we'll sit through it. But basically some former felons went out and they formed a coalition to go out and try to get people registered, because it just kind of makes sense, right? If people have made a mistake, they've paid their debt to society, you want that incentive to be there for them to have the opportunity to become full-fledged members of society where they can vote and they can do all the things that good law-abiding citizens get to do so that they can integrate back. If you always have that hanging over your head that you're never going to get to vote, what's the point of that? How is that an incentive to be the best person you can if you're still holding them down and withholding rights from them? So good. It's heartening to see that there are people in Florida who are trying to make sure that people get their vote. I think we've probably all seen this video at this point. Let's go ahead and skip that. I think everyone has seen it a few times. And this was an interesting graphic I found. You always see the first one, the red one, that shows it by land area as far as is our country red or blue. But the thing we have to remember, like it says here, land doesn't vote, people do. So if you actually look at population, you get a very different story. So if we change this map, instead of being about the areas that vote red to the people that vote red, all of a sudden you see what coincides with what we saw in the last election, which was there was around 3 million more votes cast for the Democratic candidate than the Republican candidate. And I suspect we're going to see it be even more lopsided this time. The thing is, we don't pick the president by popular vote, but it is kind of interesting to see. We keep hearing about the silent majority, but it's not really what Trump likes to call the silent majority isn't really a majority at all. They are, in fact, the minority in this country. Okay, here's some good news. Let's see if I can shrink this one down a little. Great news about births during COVID-19. So pandemic shutdown saw huge decreases in babies born prematurely. Fantastic. This is great news. Hey, Sarah, glad you joined the chat there. Glad to have you in there checking the stream out. So this is good, right? This is great to see. Pandemic shutdown saw a huge decrease in babies born prematurely, and scientists are trying to figure out why. Why are we seeing healthier babies right now? And there's kind of two things that they're sort of chasing down and suspect may be the reason that this is occurring. One is that we saw a significant decrease in population, right? And I know a lot of us, if you live in city-type areas, it's easy to ignore pollution levels because you just kind of get used to it. But doctors are showing that it doesn't take that much pollution in order to affect people's health, even adults, but especially if you're a baby forming, that level of pollution can be damaging. So that's one hypothesis that they have. The other hypothesis that they're working with is that, at least for a portion of the population, we're actually seeing less stress now, right? For many people, we're seeing a lot more stress, but a lot of those people had a lot of stress in their lives sort of to begin with, right? The people that are making the smallest amount in this country. For a lot of people, and I'll admit I'm kind of in this category, working at home now, right? Because I was basically just shifted to working at home. It's a lot less stressful. I don't have to be up super early in the morning. I can structure my day how I wanted to have it. I don't have to be I have to be at my desk at certain times when we have office hours and stuff like that. But overall, I have a lot more flexibility in my schedule, way less stressful than things used to be. So they think that for a certain portion of the population, this decreased stress level for moms carrying a baby is actually leading to the babies being much more healthy. So either way, this is some uplifting news, and that's how cute is that? Little baby wearing that face protection mask. Pretty cute there, and babies are being born a little bit healthier. So that's great. All right, what do we got next here? Okay. Oh, this was the one I was looking for earlier. So we'll just play. Not going to play it. We won't look at it now because we already talked about it. But that's the one where he was saying, where did I have it? That's the one where he was saying that it's okay for Florida to vote by mail, but no one else. And then he's going out and he's actually attacking or suing Nevada over it. All right, so it's come to light the DA is investigating Trump and his company over fraud filings. So it's come out this week that the investigation that New York State is having into Trump is a much wider investigation than we had before, right? Because more information comes out. So originally they were just looking into the 2 cases of the women who basically got hush money for not saying anything during the election about the fact that they were having affairs with the president. Well, now it looks like you wouldn't really need to look at his tax returns for that. So what's happening is the situation, it's now becoming clear that they're investigating him for other crimes as well, probably fraud, right? Fraud in the state of New York. I talked a little bit about that earlier. It's this game they play where, well, when I'm paying taxes, I'm going to make it like I don't really have that much that should be taxed. But then when I'm getting loans, I'm going to say that my net worth is really high. And either way, it's a crime. If you go into a bank and you're defrauding the bank, or you're defrauding the federal government, you kind of pick one of those, right? Which one is it? So this is one of the reasons why it looks bad. If Trump really needs to win again, or else the minute he leaves, he is going to be getting hammered with lawsuits, right? New York State is coming after him really hard. There's now women who are suing him over sexual harassment and rape allegations, stuff like that. So he's going to have some pretty big legal headaches if he ends up leaving office in January. Not going to be good there. Okay, so here's one that is just sort of one of these what's going on with the Democratic Party. So this is out of Newsweek. I can't scroll up any further to show, but this is a Newsweek article that came out this week. 87% of Democrats support Medicare for all, though Joe Biden doesn't. So this falls in that category of we all live in a representative democracy, and yet we have to ask the questions, do we have representation or do we have democracy? Like, do we have either one of those things? It sure doesn't seem like the representatives that we choose are representing the ideas that we have, right? We see this in a number of cases. The number of people in this country that are okay with closing the loopholes on background checks for buying guns, it's something like 92% of this country says, all right, if you want to have stronger background checks, go ahead and do it. And yet we don't see that becoming law. Same thing here. 87% of Democrats support Medicare for all, and yet the Democratic representative does not support it. And this actually surprised me. Some of what we saw here, these numbers really took me off guard. So we had 87% of Democrats said they were in favor of Medicare for all. Independent voters, it was 69%, and a little less than half, but still 43% of Republicans support Medicare for all. That caught me off guard. That means when you put all that data together, you're looking at 67% of the population support Medicare for all. That's 2 out of 3. So if 2 out of 3 people support this, you would think that it would get a little bit more traction in the government. And certainly, if 87% of Democrats want it, you would think that you could get your choice to go for it. But no. So one of the many reasons why Joe Biden is kind of a disappointment for many of us. I find him a disappointment, and many people seem to be. All right, New York has been very busy. So this kind of made news. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday, maybe Thursday this came out. Maybe I can't remember now. But anyways, kind of late this week, it came out that the New York Attorney General is filing a lawsuit to dissolve the National Rifle Association. Right now, a lot of people are miscommunicating or misunderstanding what this story is about. This story is not about taking gun rights away. So wherever this lawsuit goes, is not going to affect gun rights in any way. What this is about is the National Rifle Association being an absolutely corrupt organization. Some of you, I'm sure, watched it. I put a video up on this on my channel. This is about the people at the top in 3 years, they spent something like $65 million that was spent inappropriately, right? If you're a not-for-profit organization, then you have rules about how you can operate, right? You have to operate under those rules in order to qualify for not-for-profit status, and then you get certain tax considerations. Well, you got to follow the rules to do that. And this was just blatant, outright. I mean, we're talking over $20 million a year for the last 3 years was being used in ways that in no way match that tax code. And, you know, staying in rooms well over $1,000 a night for hotel rooms, fancy trips around the world for these people up at the top. Oliver North got involved because he was he was the president of the NRA for a while, and then he started sort of butting heads with the other individuals that were up at the top of the NRA, and then all this information started leaking out. Now, the NRA was created in New York, so that's why New York has some say about this, and it's been around a long time. I think it was over 100 years or something. The NRA's been around, but it's in big trouble right now, right? This level of legal analysts are saying that this looks pretty solid. They are probably going to be able to go through and dissolve that National Rifle Association. Again, when that happens, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you can't have your guns. It means that, you know, some other association is going to have to come up that hopefully is much less corrupt. And you know, and if you're a gun advocate and you've been giving money to the NRA, you should be upset about that because it's your money that they were using to stay in $1,000 a night hotels. Basically call their family members consultants and give them jobs that were $30,000 a month, stuff like that. Totally outrageous. So really everyone should be angry about this kind of stuff. Yeah, Underpants, Noam, you're right. There's a group called, I can't remember what the group's called, but there's a group that's been studying the influence that the people have compared to laws getting passed. And there's a term called flawed democracy. It's like actually a specific term that basically, if 70% of the country supports an idea, there's only a 30% chance that will actually become law, which shows that you can't really call yourself much of a democracy. If 70% of the country wants something, there's only a 3 in 10 chance of that actually becoming law. It means something else is influencing it. And you're right, it's the wealthy billionaires, as we've, forget if I have the stories on this docket, but there's some stories that came out this week about it. Just sort of laid bare the amount of money that's out there influencing our government. And Trump kind of riled some people up on his side because Sheldon Adelson, one of the big conservative donors, doesn't contribute quite as much as the Kochs, or the remaining Koch, but a lot. And Trump was kind of rude to him and called him out for not doing enough. And then Adelson was kind of like, okay, I'll take my money and go home then. And the Conservative Party is a little bit upset about that. But by all means, it happens on the other side as well, right? The Democrats we've seen Biden already talking to billionaires and that kind of stuff. So, both parties way too involved in raising money. We need to get that money out. The problem is the people who would have to make that law are the very people benefiting from the way that it's set up right now. So not good. Okay, we got Ron DeSantis. In this case, he's actually kind of calling out something which needs to be called out. But this is the governor of the state calling out the system. So Ron DeSantis acknowledges state's unemployment system was built with pointless roadblocks to pay out the least number of claims. So I'm in no way a fan of Ron DeSantis. I think he's a horrible human being, but we should listen to what he says.
Floridians are out of work. That is according to the state's unemployment website. It's forcing many to file for benefits that some criticize are not nearly enough. The unemployment website has been plagued with problems. At the beginning of the coronavirus crisis, some Floridians say they weren't even able to get onto the site. CBS 4's Jim DeFede joins us live with the exclusive details. And Jim, what's the governor telling you?
So last night we talked about how the state's $275 unemployment benefit is one of the worst in the country. But as you said, even before people could even qualify for that, they had to be able to sign up. And the sign-up process was horrific. We remember those terrible stories we were hearing about the state website and people having to stand in lines to get paper applications because they couldn't file with them. Well, I asked the governor whether or not he's going to sue as a result of getting back the $77 million the state spent just 5 or 6 years ago to build that site. And he had a lot to say about it and something incredibly revealing. suffering. Here, take a
from the end of fourth week of March through most of April, we were in really dire straits with that system. So I do think we should get the results of the IG, and then if there needs to be some type of suit or some type of accountability, we absolutely need to do it. I mean, my thing is like a lot of these unemployment systems throughout the country, weren't very good, but a lot of them are like 40, 50 years old. Ours wasn't really old. I mean, ours was really 5, 6 years ago, and it should have been done better for that price tag to produce better results.
Do you believe that the system was in part put together the way it was to discourage people from being able to collect unemployment?
I think that was the animating philosophy. I mean, having studied how it was internally constructed, I think the goal was, for whoever designed it, was let's put as many kind of pointless roadblocks along the way so people just say, oh, the hell with it, I'm not going to do that. And, for me, let's decide on what the benefit is and let's get it out as efficiently as possible. We shouldn't necessarily do these roadblocks to do it. So
yeah, so, like I mentioned, no fan of Ron DeSantis, but in this case, he's basically calling out the government is not working for the people that they're supposed to be governing, right? This is completely ridiculous. We just talked about a moment ago about the government not really representing its people and our representatives not representing us. And here we go. We have a system that was built with the intention of people not being able to get unemployment. I believe in kind of an honest system, which is kind of what he said at the end. You decide what people should get, right? You be open and honest about it, and then you allow people to get those things, right? And if you think that the state's paying too much in unemployment, and if the state thinks that, then you can lower the amount they get. But you don't say, okay, here's the unemployment. By the way, we're going to make it virtually very difficult for you to get these things. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's literally the government working against its own people, which we should be fighting against, and we should getting these people out of office. Which one's this? Oh, we've got the Aaron Burnett story, so it's kind of interesting to see these two going at each other. Aaron Burnett kind of calling out Peter Navarro, who's first of all, Peter Navarro is an economic advisor, and it's, if you talk to economists, they're a little sketchy on Peter Navarro's economics anyway, so most people don't think he's exactly an outstanding economist to begin with. And then on top of this, you can see how this sort of a dumpster fire of an interview. Let's see.
Got a lot of coverage for that op-ed that you wrote, Peter, the one about Anthony Fauci, that he's been wrong about everything I've interacted with him on. And the reason I bring that up,
which is not the same thing as being wrong about everything, which was misconstrued. It's just there were a few things we have disagreements about. But I'll tell you this. Today at 5 o'clock, I spent about an hour with him on a Zoom call and 20 other scientists from NIH. We get along well, so happy to answer your question. But he's on the team, I'm on the team. Basically, one of his missions is to encourage people to wear masks, and my mission is to make sure we can manufacture them. And it's a nice division of labor as a rule.
Right. All right. That makes sense. But what you obviously wrote in that op-ed, I want to just ask you about something else he said today in that conversation that he had with Sanjay Gupta, which was, broadcast. And here's what he talked about. Here he is.
Getting death threats from me and my family.
Sorry, I think
we're angry at each other. Well, I've never seen America, and I go back, and I'm 71 years old.
Right, but you're the one who wrote an op-ed saying Anthony Fauci's been wrong.
This president wants to defeat the virus and unite this country around certain common principles, and that's what we.
5 studies, but there aren't. Okay.
No, hang on. Let me say one thing.
Yeah.
William Ford, William O'Deal of the Ford Hospital System, submitted with a group of scientists from Baylor.
To say, first of all, there's many millions of doctors in this country. There's 5 peer-reviewed studies that show it not to be true. That study is a flawed study.
Sorry, I had this queued up, but when I refreshed the site, I lost my place where it was queued up.
All right,
well, we shouldn't be, but let me just say, first of all, there's many millions of doctors in this country. There's 5 peer-reviewed studies that show it not to be true. There's Dr. Birx, there's Dr. Gerard, there's Dr. Fauci.
Hang on.
And to that study particularly, Dr. Fauci said that study is a flawed study. But I need to do this, Peter, because what you're saying is irresponsible.
All right, let me say this to you, okay? And I reach out to all your viewers. Scott Adams, you know Scott Adams, right? He's the guy who wrote the Dilbert cartoon. He did a beautiful video, 10-minute video on Twitter. And the thesis of the video is that CNN might be killing thousands because of the way they've treated that. So I would just ask, I'll let Scott Adams' video be my defense on this.
Okay, well, can I
let
just
you
say
keep
something? I
taking
find that
the
to be
other side.
offensive because he's a comic strip writer. So for you to say
Understood.
that okay, so I just want to give
Understood.
you, because I want to be clear. I just said Dr.
Understood.
Fauci, the person that the President of the United
Well, I
States
said
has in
Dr.
charge
O'Neill.
of testing.
And it kind of devolves from there. Again, sorry, I lost my place where to start that. So she's calling out doctors. He's calling out comic book artists who are known for being, right-wing comic book artists. And this is how our government is operating, is you're taking the word of comic book artists and putting it on the same level of scientists and doctors who know what they're talking about. I mean, Fauci is one of the most knowledgeable people in the world on these kind of viruses. That's why he's in this position, right? It's not like they just went and found him doing some kind of general practice at home. He's literally an expert in this kind of stuff. And, it's disappointing to see that we can't argue with facts in this country. Okay, related to the coronavirus. So we've got here remdesivir. So there's a couple problems going on with this remdesivir. So the public already has paid for remdesivir. So remdesivir is not a cure for the coronavirus. It's one of these therapeutics that they talk about. So you would take it and it would increase your chances of being okay if you take it under the right conditions. You take it at the right point of having the virus and you have certain conditions. There can be issues. No, I'm thinking of one of the other drugs. But so this remdesivir is somewhat promising. It can increase your chances of surviving if you fit the right conditions and you get coronavirus. So it costs about $10 to produce a dose of the remdesivir. They're going to sell it for about $3,000, right? And usually the argument is, well, yeah, but you have to understand these drug companies spend billions of dollars to develop a drug or millions of dollars to develop a drug. They have to recoup that cost. It's not just the cost of creating the pill or, whatever it is, a shot or whatever. And then, the cost of that, you have to take all the research and development into account, except we've already paid that. Taxpayers have contributed at least $70.5 million to develop medication that has become experimental coronavirus treatment. We've created that, right? We paid for that, but Gilead Sciences has decided that, okay, even though the American people paid for that, we're also going to charge you $3,000 for something that costs $10 to create. So this is ridiculous, and I think it was previously thought that it was around $37.5 million we've contributed, but it's come out it's more like $70.5 million that we've contributed to this drug. And oh, by the way, they're going to sell us a $10 treatment at $3,000 a piece. This Gilead Sciences is also under attack for the fact that they apparently have another drug that works, that in trials has worked better than this remdesivir, but their patent is going to run out sooner. In other words, they wouldn't be the only person able to create that drug, so they're not going with that one, right? That appears to be the case. So again, it's not in any, like you would hope that when this medication is being figured out what to do about it, they would be doing it for the public's good, right? Thinking, okay, we're going to put out the best medication for people to survive the most. Nope, it's about what can we get a few years of money out of rather than just the next year. There's not a consideration, and this is one of the big marks against capitalism, is that you start making decisions like this with people's lives on the line. You're making decisions about profit versus people living and dying. So that Gilead Sciences is going to come out of this whole thing. They're going to make a ton of money. They're going to be absolutely hated on the other time. Yeah, the government should nullify those patents, or they, what would have been good is if originally they had worked out this patent and said, okay, you can keep this patent, but then we're going to cap what you can sell your thing at. So maybe if it costs $10, maybe you sell it for $20 or $30 or something, since we paid to develop it. Yeah, right. We talked about that earlier, right? Trump's working on breaking down the Social Security and Medicare. I hit that right out at the beginning. But yeah, that's right. So it's not a good situation, right? Not a good situation. All right, here's some good news. Portland, Maine just unanimously voted to ban government use of facial recognition technology. The movement to defend our privacy rights from face surveillance has now expanded to a third state. So it's very limited, right? This is Portland, Maine, not Portland, Oregon. But this is good because what you don't want is them to be able to set this up, and then when there is a protest, right, if you have a peaceful protest, you don't really want the government having a list of people who were there. Now, everyone's wearing masks, making this a little bit harder, but we need to see more of this. We need to see more localities saying, yes, cannot use facial recognition by the police, right? There are lots of things the police should not be doing. This one should be added, so at least good news. Portland, Maine seems to be on it. Deutsche Bank gives up Trump records under subpoena, New York Times report. So this actually I talked about earlier. This was what I was referring to. Deutsche Bank finally has had to give up those Trump records, and it's also indicated to us that the investigations that Trump is undergoing are much broader than we previously understood, right? So like I say, the minute he steps out of office, he's going to be in a bit of trouble. And Kodak. So this kind of shocked everyone. Kodak spent, well, when Kodak was even brought up, because they were kind of trying, Kodak was kind of a name. They were a dying company, right? People aren't buying film cameras anymore, stuff like that. People kind of thought Kodak was done for. But apparently what they decided in all of this, they started lobbying Trump to tell him, look, you can use us to start developing stuff. But they lobbied heavily to do it. So this, this is part of that. It's legal. It's legal to use this lobbying, but it's very distasteful. And most American people don't like this. Again, things we wish was changed about our government. They scored a $765 million COVID deal to develop stuff for Trump. It'd be good if they didn't have to do the lobbying in order to do that, right? If you're a business and you can spend a few million to get a $765 million contract, then you absolutely would do that, right? That's not how our government should be working. Again, kind of capitalism at play here. Capitalism at play. So then Bernie Sanders has been in the news a little bit this week. 467 billionaires have seen their wealth go up by $730 billion during the pandemic. So while most people are having a very hard time, or many people, a significant portion of our population is either worried about having enough food. We saw, was it last week, we saw something like 30 million Americans were going hungry that week. And then now we're going to see this landslide of evictions. Even though the president signed that executive order, that only applies to federal stuff, right? That's not going to apply to like a lot of the local evictions that are going to be taking place. So that's still a big problem. But the billionaires are doing great, right? Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, right? People at Amazon, they're doing fantastically well. They're making tens of billions of dollars. We've seen days where in one day, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, these people make more than $10 billion on a single day when they do their earnings report and stuff like that. That's gross at the same time that many people are doing so poorly. So what he ended up doing was suggesting maybe we should tax the rich, right? Sort of novel idea. Maybe we should tax them. Let's see what he has to say about it.
It is morally obscene for billionaires to use a global pandemic as an opportunity to make outrageous profits and to very substantially increase their wealth. And that is why, Mr. President, I will be introducing legislation tomorrow to tax the obscene wealth gains billionaires have made during this public health crisis. It is morally obscene for billionaires to use a global pandemic as a...
So a couple things about this. I like it. I like what he's doing. It has zero chance of getting through the Senate, right? Senate's never going to agree to it, at least not now, under what we have now. Also, this would not be an income tax because billionaires don't really pay income tax. They're largely capital gains. They own a lot of stocks, stuff like that. So this is a wealth tax. It says we figure out what you're worth. We're going to take a one-time fee, and then we're going to use it to actually keep the country afloat so that we don't just crater economically and have all these people hurting. So it's a great idea. right? It's not going to happen, but it's a good idea. And it's the kind of discussions our government officials should be having, right? They should be talking about. All right, it seems like we are on the verge of finding out who Biden has picked or will be picking for VP. They've kind of been playing this game. You never really know, but it looks like the situation. They've been playing this game where they've been leaking things, right? They've been leaking information, and it kind of tests the water. Let's see what people think of it. So we'll leak this name out there. There's been some stuff that looks a little sketchy, people taking photos of Biden having stuff in his hand. A lot of times that stuff's kind of set up ahead of time to leak that information, make it look like an accident, and then you can get feedback. What does the public actually think about this? We saw a couple weeks ago, so it was Karen Bass. They put Karen Bass's name out there, and that only lasted a few days before some old videos of her, which weren't terrible, but they didn't really put her in a good light. She was praising Church of Scientology, a couple other videos that just didn't come off great, so she quickly fell out of contention, or at least we think that she did. And people around the Biden campaign are, they're saying, they're kind of leaking here, that it looks like it's down to Kamala Harris and Susan Rice. So, probably not really the pick a lot of people would have liked, but it's also hard to compare these two because they did very different jobs, right? We can look at Kamala Harris and at least look at her voting record, which unfortunately under at least the last couple of years under McConnell, there have been very few votes other than to put federal judges in place. So, but we do at least have Kamala Harris on record as what she's voted for, what she's against, what she said. Susan Rice, being the national security advisor, did a completely different job, right? So she was largely, more foreign stuff, basically a different job. So it's hard to compare these two on anything because the information we have about them is basically in completely different areas. So we'll see. I think this is the week that Biden is supposed to announce. I think by the middle of August, he's supposed to have announced who that person is, and then we can actually have a real person and know who we're dealing with. And then there'll be all sorts of scrutiny coming out. Some people are sort of bracing for, what are the discussions that are going to happen around this? So we'll see. Hopefully they happen on a civil and professional level. Some people are saying it's going to get kind of nasty. We'll have to see. We'll see once we actually know something. Pentagon officials say Trump was talking nonsense when he called Beirut explosion an attack. So this was tragic, right? 300,000 people have lost their homes. I forget what the death toll was. Last I heard it was maybe 140, something like that, or around 130, something like that. And so this was a terrible thing. We've all seen that explosion, which was absolutely massive and destructive. And it was a tragedy. But it appears that there's not a lot of evidence that it was an attack. So Trump started coming out, in my opinion, irresponsibly saying that he thought it could definitely be an attack. But at first he said, well, if you look at the explosion, it looks like a bomb. Well, I highly doubt that Trump has any kind of real strong background in explosives and knowing what the different types of explosions look like. And there really is no other evidence indicating that it was any kind of an attack. He says, well, there's a clip, you can look it up. Well, I talked to my generals and they agree. They think it might be an attack as well. The Pentagon came out and said, basically, we don't know what he's talking about. So at least the Pentagon's willing to step up and say that because, the problem is when the president says stuff like this, it affects other countries. It affects how other countries trust us. It affects how other countries deal with each other, how they deal with us. It affects our relationships with them. You're really supposed to be kind of careful about the things we've said. So hopefully we only have about, 6 more months of this sort of stream of consciousness talking that Trump does. Okay, here's kind of a nice little one, kind of some eye bleach, little bit of candy here. Turtles in Greece thrive as a result of coronavirus lockdown and downturn in tourism. So these turtles, these loggerhead turtles, which are having a very difficult time, are doing much, much better under the coronavirus. Why? Because tourism has plummeted in these areas, which isn't going to help the people of Greece, but it is helping the turtles so that at least the environment is getting a chance to, in some way, start to recover. because they're not, they're not having all this impact of tourism affecting them. Yeah, capitalism is deadly for sure, Bob. That's absolutely true. Capitalism and the way we run it in this country, where it's unchecked and unregulated in a lot of respects, is absolutely a problem. Okay, yep, here it was, Iowa. I don't remember which one I said earlier. I might have misspoke and said Ohio, but we've got that the Iowa governor signs order restoring felon voting rights. So that's good. Again, they were the last state. So after, I forget if it was Kentucky or Arkansas, one of those states changed so that they were giving voting rights back to felons. And then Florida, at least in a limited way, gave voting rights back to their felons. Iowa was the only state left and basically was like, we don't want to be the only one left. So they signed an order as well. This one's a little bit interesting because we've got a situation where she had to do it through executive order. She promised to make this happen. She issued an order, but she's encouraging, and basically they think it will happen, where the state legislature is going to do this the right way. They're going to write up a law, they're going to send it through, and they want to make it a constitutional amendment. That way we don't play this game where when the next governor comes into place, they just undo it, and then the felons lose their voting rights again. That you don't want that kind of game going on. So they're trying to actually make it a state amendment. It doesn't cover murderers or sexual assaults, right? But at least the majority of nonviolent offenders are going to be getting their vote back, which is good. We're supposedly a democracy. We need people voting, right? And I'm sure we're all going to be shocked by this one. Billionaires are funding Trump's suppression lawsuits, voter suppression lawsuits. Of course they are. So a group of billionaires, and you can look down here, you can look it up. And I'm always amazed how little these billionaires have to spend in order to basically buy laws, right? I mean, we're talking a few $100,000. Sometimes when they buy these politicians, their donation was like $30,000 to McConnell and these kind of people, and yet then they own that person. So we've got a list of billionaires. Basically, this accounts for 15% of the legal fees that are going on to keep people from being able to vote. It's coming straight from billionaires. So they're funding these legal attacks because so basically what's happened is the billionaires have sat down and said, well, whatever happens, our tax rates are going to be better under Trump than they are under Biden. So we need to make sure Trump wins. So they're banding together, and we can see all these people donating hundreds of thousands of dollars so that these lawsuits can move forward, like the one in Nevada where Trump said, Vote by mail is perfectly fine in Florida, totally unacceptable in Nevada. They filed a lawsuit. Well, here's who's paying for some of this stuff, right? These billionaires. So you can go through and look at that, right? Which I'm sure surprises probably none of us. I think this is good news, right? We can argue over it, but I think it's good news. Biden says he wouldn't stand in the way of a Trump prosecution. So this is a fine line to walk here, because what we don't want is to become a country where you imprison your political opponents, because that is the type of thing that happens in authoritarian governments, exactly the kind of thing that we're trying to avoid. So basically what he said is he would, they're going to have to basically fix all the degrading of our departments that's been done in the federal government, right? All the IGs, not all, many of the IGs, the inspectors general, have been fired. And we need to get those back in place because they're supposed to be independently checking these departments to make sure they run appropriately. We need to get rid of people like Bob Barr, who are using the Department of Justice essentially as a way to increase Trump's power, not as a way of actually trying to run law and order in our country. So that would be step one, is getting these departments so they function properly. Once that is done, Biden has said, then I'm going to be hands off and I'm going to let the Department of Justice decide if it is appropriate to go after Trump or not. So essentially, it wouldn't be him going after it. At least that's what we're being told. It's always, you never quite know what's going on there. But that's actually good news if, in fact, the lawyers are going to decide who we should go after, not someone who's saying, well, it was a political opponent. You need actually the law saying this is what we need to do. Yeah, Barr's been a mess. You're right, Bob. Barr has been a mess since way back. So for decades, over many Whoops, sorry. I thought I had that fixed. Looks like it's sort of scolding you there. Sorry about that. I'll try to edit that. Still kind of learning the settings for having in here. Yeah, bar's been a problem for a long time. So we need to get people like him out and then actually put people in place who aren't swayed by the politics of who's in office at the time. They're officials who have been there for decades and decades and want to do the right job. They want to make sure our democracy is working, that our country works. They're people who are dedicated to these things. That's what we need to turn the Department of Justice back into. And then we'll see what happens with Trump. Like I say, I think at both the state and federal level, I think Trump's going to have his hands full probably for the remainder of his life. He's not the healthiest. I don't know how many years he has left, but I think there are going to be some unpleasant lawsuits going on. And this is just bizarre. I mean, this is almost like living in some kind of weird reality, but that's what we've gotten used to with Trump. Let's see.
Turnaround times have, over the last week, the testing turnaround times have declined significantly as our major commercial labs have begun pooling samples. And we've also been able to send out many more of the tests, which are the 5-minute to 15-minute result tests. Testing samples from multiple patients in one batch is also something that we're very focused on and doing, but in the not too distant future, we'll have so many tests where it's a quick test. They call it a quick test, 5 minutes to 15 minutes. So we won't even have to worry too much about the process of sending and receiving. Because if you figure it takes a day to send and a day to receive, and let's say a day at the laboratory, that's 3 days right there. And the other tests, you can have them in 5 to 15 minutes. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll be pursuing a major executive order requiring health insurance companies to cover all pre-existing conditions for all customers. That's a big thing.
So right there at the end was the big thing. The other information was important, but that's the big one at the end. Trump has signed an executive order making sure that pre-existing conditions have to be covered. Problem with that, pre-existing conditions were already covered, right? But he even sent out a tweet, right? Get this on here. Mini Mike Bloomberg is spending a lot of money on false advertising. I was the person who saved pre-existing conditions in your healthcare. You have it now. Yes, we do have it now. We had it previously. We also have it now. While at the same time winning the fight to rid you of the expensive, unfair, and very unpopular individual mandate. So basically, he's taking credit for the pre-existing conditions while also trying to dismantle the Affordable Care Act and then saying he's the one who brought it to us. And as we've seen, about 30% of the population will believe that Trump is the one who brought us the pre-existing conditions clause, but we already have it. It's weird to take something that already exists and then say, I created this. This is what I'm giving to you. Aren't I great for doing that? A little bizarre. Okay, couples. Let's see. Let's go with 2 more stories here. I think we should go with. Here's one. Actually, this wasn't the one, but let's skip this one. It's just Biden saying ridiculous stuff again, putting his foot in his mouth and then getting trouble for making racist type comments. This is the one I wanted to look at. So I am highly interested in this. I hope it goes the right way because I'm actually a big fan of Nina Turner and Cornel West. So I'm interested in this for sure. So Nina Turner and Cornel West will join MPP to headline the People's Convention on August 30th. So end of the month. Jimmy Dore, and Ryan Knight, I'm not super familiar with Ryan Knight. The little that I've seen seems like maybe he's got his head in the right direction, so that's good. And many speakers will discuss forming a major new political party in America. So this has kind of, I think, been bubbling up for a while inside the Democrat Party. You're having a big split between sort of what you would consider your traditional mainstream Democrats, and then you have people that are further left, which is, I would put myself a little further left than your mainstream Democrats. So you're talking about people like Bernie Sanders and even more to the left are not real happy with people like Biden right now. So they're essentially saying, look, the Democratic Party is not working for us. Maybe we want to start our own party. So I don't know the details of this. This is just sort of developing. But I'm definitely interested in what they have to say, and I will be tuning into that for sure later this month. So if you're someone who's interested in that, go ahead, look it up. If you want to look it up on Twitter, Movement for a People's Party, look up Nina Turner and Cornel West and see what they have to say about it. I will certainly be finding out about this few more weeks. We got 3 weeks before this kind of develops into anything, but I'm a little concerned about this. If you end up doing something that's going to split votes off from the Democratic Party, you'd hate to see the Republican Party benefit from that, but people are getting fairly fed up with having what we want ignored by the people we put in office, which it kind of seems like that's what Biden is going to be, right? Biden, and that's what he's running on, is essentially saying, I'm not as bad as Trump. And I agree, he's not as bad as Trump, but in no way is he someone that I think is going to bring about the country that we need. Okay, last story on the way out. We got this Michigan official uses the N-word when asked why he wasn't wearing a mask. Then he doubles down with more racial slurs. So this is just coming up more and more, where there are government officials in place who are just brazenly racist, just absolutely racist. Like, not like uninformed, ignorant racist, like using the N-word racist, right? Come on. How do we still have people in office doing this? So basically what happened, this individual was in office, and let's see, this was actually the follow-up. Right, so asked about why he wasn't wearing a mask, he went on this diatribe about, well, this whole thing is because of N-words down in Detroit. Why someone would think, first of all, to think that is absolutely horrible, but then to not know that you shouldn't be saying stuff like that. And then later, he still didn't get it, went on air, and when interviewed about it on the radio, no, I don't regret calling it an N-word, right? Going on using the N-word multiple times in that conversation, basically just crashing the whole thing down. People like this absolutely need to be removed. Then he said he was going to resign. It kind of took some of the heat off of him, but then he just pretended like it didn't happen, and appears like he is in fact going to be taking office. So this is something that hopefully is going to get a little bit more attention in the news, so the heat cranks up on him, and we don't have this Eckerl, I keep saying his name wrong, Eckerl out of Michigan, county official in Michigan. We don't want people like this in office who think it's okay to think like this, who think it's okay to talk like this. We need this person not there, right? So hopefully this gains a little steam, at least in Michigan, and goes from there. So that's our last story of the evening. Thanks everybody for checking things out. I love to see people making comments in the chat there. School boards do matter for sure. I have been streaming on Twitch throughout the week, so if any of you use Twitch, feel free to hop on over there. Follow me on Twitch so that when I pop up over there, Twitch's tools for interacting with the chat are a little bit better. Excuse me. It works a little better to interact with the chat while I'm talking about things. I'd love to have you guys over there. Guys and ladies over there, and everybody, right? Whoever, come on over, be a part of things. It's fantastic. Otherwise, if you like showing up for the Saturday YouTube stream only, feel free to do that. It's great to have people here. Looks like we're getting a few more viewers each time, which is great. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope the rest of your Saturday is fantastic and relaxing and enjoying. Go enjoy yourselves. Reward yourself a bit for a week of living through all this kind of news. So good work, and we will see you in a week. Thanks, everybody.